What we're up to today is that we're going to have a look at the process that's involved in my picture book, The Art of the Whiz. And when I look at it, I realise that there's really, the book is a process of asking questions. And, you know, we ask one question and look at that and you get another question, and this whole story unfolds out of that process of asking questions. And it seems that there's really only 8 basic steps in the whole process. Rather than it being outrageously complex, it's really quite a simple step-by-step story that just goes through these 8 simple steps. But each time whatever unfolds is actually quite powerful and quite impactful. And so it seems like it's a big thing, but the steps to get to that big thing is really very simple. And so the first step, you know, of looking to see the reality that we live in is what's there, what's there, what's in front of us. And so what happens is that this brings us to astronomy, and we have to just face the reality of what astronomy tells us. And essentially we can start right with reality, which is right outside there, the Earth sitting right outside there, and this is a planet, and you know it's a reality within the solar system. It's a great big rock in the solar system, and we also have that this solar system is within the galaxy. And so these are all realities for us, and they're monstrous. You know, the galaxy's 100,000 light years across, and you know it's really big. And so where we are, it takes 200 million years to go once around, and we're moving at 64,000 miles per hour. You know, it's big stuff. And so that's our big neighborhood. That's our big parent, the galaxy. That is the you know, the cosmic spirit is the galaxy. And you know, so this is real. And so solar system, planet within the solar system, but because of the life processes of the planet, it's created this atmosphere that supports life. And that's out of the processes of the planet. You know, the calcium, all the calcium on the planet has actually gone through some living organism and been metabolized out of a biological process. And all the oxygen in the atmosphere, of which we have 20%, has all come from a plant, you know, photosynthesizing, giving off all this oxygen. So life has created this life body of the planet in the atmosphere. You know, and these are all real, these things. And so, you know, this is what astronomy gives us, is this context of the environment that we live in. And so that's what's real. You know, we can all accept that that's real. And so, you know, there's, you know, a couple of processes when we're looking at what's real. We can sort of see that in this picture, the purple is all that outer dimension. And so that's the spirit, the galaxy sphere, the purple. And then we come in one energetic dimension and we go to the solar system, and that's the blue ring in there. And then when we come to the Earth, in the middle is the Earth. But of course the Earth has created through movement this polarization of activity that leads to the physical bodies that exist within the atmosphere of the Earth. And so we have these three main worlds that Rudolf Steiner talks about, being the spirit world and the soul world is blue, and then the physical world is this red one in the middle. And out of that physical world has come three more bodies, three more stages out of the life process of the Earth, which is this duality, the physical body and of course the etheric body. And so that's what we have. That's what's real for us. That is it. And so this, seen within a spherical activity gives us this picture that, as a representation of reality. Now, the next question, the next question is, this is what is. It's just sitting there. The galaxy, the solar system, planet, they're all just hanging out there in their place, doing their thing. Now, the question is that, of course, in creation, everything is moving. And, I've made my equation, creation equals movement plus time. I appreciate it's fairly fundamental in its appearance, but there's a big truth there that, everything is moving. And in that movement, it creates all the vortexing and the spiraling and the golden mean mathematics that we find in creation. It's the movement that's doing this. And so once we get these basic organised activities and sort of bring them into life and bring them into movement, then those bodies organise in a different way. They polarise. So the spirit and the physical actually polarise on the vertical axis, and the etheric and the astral polarise on this horizontal axis. And so this is something to observe. We can see this a bit closer later, but what we also observe in this picture here is that we in our culture really orientate off the planets and the zodiac behind the planets, right? That's our big thing. And so where in this structure are they? And the point is, they're all on this horizontal plane. That's where the sun is running around, and so they're all there. And look, north, south, east and west is happening over here, and all these guys are running around there. So it's quite a different orientation, whether we orientate off north or whether we orientate off the zenith. And it's quite an interesting sort of thought to play with and run with and be with. And so we can look at this picture again in this picture here. So that's the first two questions. What is, and what happens when it moves? And so that's what we have here. What is, and then what happens when it moves? And it polarizes and organizes into these world bodies on this primary axis of north, south, east, west that we saw. And the secondary axis that we see is the internal bodies that organise in those spaces in between. So that's the first two questions. And so what we get out of this, of course, is that we have these astronomical basis of the four bodies, And then we have how those four bodies organise in life. And so when we come to that picture a little bit further and we listen to Rudolf Steiner, he's talking about how do these bodies all interact with each other. Not just how are they sort of pushing each other around, but what happens when the spirit works down into the etheric body and starts to organise the etheric body. And so, you know, he'll give a story of the 12 senses as an expression of that, you know. And so we have this question of how do we get an image of how these bodies all work together? That's the third question. How do we do that? How do we understand or see them? And it just turns out that if we get this picture here and put that picture there on top of it, then we get this picture here. And so what happens is we have the ring picture going around like that, and then we have the arm pictures going around like that. And so together we're then able to see every option of the bodies interacting with each other, because we have all the bodies this way and then we have all the bodies in the 8 petal. And so this then gives us something that we can look at and observe. And, you know, we then later come into circles and we look at the power of circles. And so this picture offers the interpretation of the energetic organisation of every circle on the planet when organised off magnetic north. So while it's a very simple picture that's come from an incredibly simple artistic action, the actual what it is and what it represents is, for me, outrageously powerful out of such a simple question. And part of this is because we're following archetypal law. We're just using the sort of archetypal structure of creation as the organising principle for what we're looking at. And so the possibility of truth arising out of that process is incredibly high, because you're using a truth and you're sort of multiplying it by a truth and you're getting a truth. and that's been the sort of, and this is the whole process. It's like, okay, we've got this truth. And then we can come into chemistry. So we've got this truth as a result of 3 questions. And of course, with this, we can go into the agriculture course, because we've created this patterning of energetic interpretation. And of course, the agriculture course is really just Steiner talking about how all these different energies are organised together and function. But he uses a particular language to portray that. And you know, we see that he often uses different languages for the same story. And you know, so you know, there's the plant story with the wood sap and life sap and cambium told in the Cosmic Workings Earth of Man lectures. And then a week later, he tells the same seasonal story in Man, a Symphony of Creative Word, and he uses the story of the elementals and the ethers. And so then, you know, some months later, he tells the same seasonal story in the agriculture course, but he uses a different language again. And so this particular language that he uses is we can get all of that and relate it to the energetic activity that he's talking about and get a glossary of the agriculture course, basically, from that picture. And that's just, following our nose. It's not even asking a question, really. It's just looking at what is there. And of course, the next thing that we come to is chemistry. And and again, we just do really simple questions with chemistry. It sort of looks quite difficult, chemistry, and it's quite confusing for people. And in our conversations, it's really become up as to why would people use chemistry? Why would you bother? And I can really see the argument why a lot of people wouldn't bother, because you can't use it. You can't actually get the chemicals. You've got to watch that, everything's really toxic and poisonous. So, you've got to be pretty flash to not kill yourself. And so I can see that people don't have much use for it. But part of the process that we've gone through here, that hopefully we'll reach at the end of the story, is that we can collect all these elements safely out of any circle. And I know it's jumping to the end of the story a wee bit, but that's what makes it possible, is that we can collect in glass bottles of water the patterns and the energetic activity of all the elements. And once we can do that, we can then use them in very practical ways. So it is worth persevering, gaining a little bit of an insight into the story, really. And so the story comes to chemistry, and of course chemistry has some big problems in that the picture that we're given is rectangular. And the first hurdle I came to was that calcium, its atomic weight is 40, and this is made up of so much neutrons and so much rings of electrons, and on the outside there's only how many? 2, I think, and so I've got to think of it as a spherical object, because it's this sphere of molecules of activity. And so I then go back to the rectangle and sort of where am I, and back out to the sphere, and I found that really difficult. And I sort of thought many other people might as well, that this might be the first hurdle of chemistry, is being able to translate this rectangle into a sphere. So comes the question, why don't we look at chemistry as a sphere or a circle? Start with a circle and then see how we can go getting it into a sphere. But it's like, let's do that. And so one of the processes that we can see in the periodic table, one of the other issues of the periodic table, is really that they run it according to atomic weight, which sort of fits them into this very rigid sort of sequential motion, when in fact we know we have 3 separate groups of elements, and we call them the major elements and the trace elements and the lanthanoids and actinides, and so the rare earths down the bottom. And so why don't we separate them? Because there's 8 major elements, 10 trace elements, and 14 rare earths. And so the simple question there is, why don't we do that? Give them their own grouping and sort of see how they sit on the circle. And we can look at it, as music and harmonics, and sort of see that there are these 3 different harmonic resonance of creation, and that there's other resonance. When we look at the vortex, there's 12 resonance there at least, primary resonances, but the chemical elements are actually only manifesting on the 4th, the 5th and the 7th. They're the 3 planes of existence where these elements manifest. But all those other resonances are available in the circle as well. You know, we can pick up anything, anywhere out of the circle. It's just the chemical elements resonate and organise into certain places. But the whole field is energetically stimulated and we can get whatever we want. So, when we come to this organisation, it's we've got these three groups of elements all on a circle, and so why don't we just put them one on top of the other and look through there and see who's sitting with each other in the circle. And so that's what it gives us, that picture. That's a pretty simple question, isn't it? You know, like this is real sort of baseline bloody chemistry. So simple. And so, but that's what you get. You get this mixture. And of course, what we can do now is we can play a couple of games, but we can just get the chemistry and put it with the energetic pattern that we've already discovered in our journey. And so what this gives us is the energetic activity of all of the elements of the periodic table. Again, pretty simple, isn't it? You know, it's just put them there. And, you know, after the years of actually testing this whole thing, I'm quite convinced that this is real. And I've got those quotes from Hugh Lovell, who have actually stood up and after his 20 years of working with this, said that he believes what I'm saying. He proves it every time, he says, with his biochemical understanding. It just keeps giving it to him. And in his last talk, before he died, just after he died, Shabri sent me over a copy of a video of his last talk, and right in the sort of end of it, he came up with this periodic table picture. He really loved that picture, and he makes this comment. You know, here's this thing, and he says that I did it and stuff, and I think he then went, just look at it. All the energetic activities are sitting right there for all the elements. You know, the colour and so on sort of tells you what's going on. You know, and it is. It's you know, it's great. Great picture. And again, that came just from us following our nose. You know, we got that, you know, you get this picture here. And so the question comes, how do you make that picture into a three-dimensional structure? You know, how are you going to do that? So you just get three of them and you just muck around and put them together. And my son did this on Sol, on his architect software, and so this was what comes out when you put those three planes together. This is the picture. So, you know, as I say, it sort of shows you the two crosses. There's this vertical cross through the magnetics, and then there's this other cross down through there, which is based on the horizontal axis, which we worship, and that's the zenith and the nadia. So that's the seasonal cross. So these are the two crosses that we see all through these diagrams, is those two things. That's what they are. So, yeah, so there you go. So we get to this process where we've followed our nose more or less and just found the energetic activities of all of chemistry. You know, it's not bad lying around, eh? A few simple questions. Oh, I love it. So from there, what we can do is another simple question. Okay, we've got this sort of universal pattern of organised chemistry going on here. Now, what can we do that would make this picture more relevant to life and life processes? So, the answer is, why don't you get the picture and just spin it 45 degrees and put it on the internal physical arm. Instead of it sitting on the world physical arm, we're going to just turn it 45 degrees and sit it on the internal physical arm. So we now get a different orientation to look at. But when we look at that, so that's question, simple answer. And then when we look at what we get here, what we can identify is that the elements of clay, aluminium, silica, and the phosphate that it readily locks up, are all sitting down here in the picture. And the elements of humus that work with carbon and oxygen, and in humus we fix boron and nitrogen. And so what we've got here is boron, nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen sitting here. So this is humus layer in the soil. And then we go up to this layer and we've got calcium and magnesium coming in with sulfur and selenium in the whole process of leaf development and photosynthesis. And then when we come up to this part of the chart, we see the potassium chloride, which is used in the fruiting of plants. And so what we get sitting in the periodic table is this image of nerve sense, rhythmic, metabolic, just sitting there. And you can read all of this in Hauschka, Nature of Substance, when he's talking about the activities in the atmosphere, the geosphere, and the hydrosphere. He just tells this story. And so here it is. All we did was turn it 45 degrees, and that's the story that pops out right in front of us when we can see it. Because I did this picture way back in 2003, and had it up on the website and stuff, but I didn't know what I was looking at, and I always had this sort of sense that at some point this picture is just going to open up and it's going to be clear as a bell, you know, and I didn't get that from the first picture. Yeah, I could see stuff in it, but once you look into this picture, then there's this whole sort of alchemy that's sitting in the picture. And we can start with this picture here, which is the story of the metallic salts in the metallic states in chemistry. And so we start with metals over here, and the alkali metals, and we move around into the non-metals, into the gases, into the noble gases. So that's just what happens when you look at the metallic states of the elements when they're in a circle. And so what we can see in this is this polarization between the salt pole down here and the sulfur pole up here, and the salt pole over here and the sulfur pole over here. And so here we have it. We have this natural sort of alchemy sitting in the metallic states. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? You know, there's no arguing here about this. And we're just observing, That's all. And so we take that whole alchemy and we can see it sitting in the elements in this story, just in the way the elements organise themselves. So we can then take this simple picture that we've got, and we can relate it back to this story. This is my interpretation of Rudolf Steiner's 1920 and 1921 medical lectures. And the base picture is coming out of the last set of medical lectures he did in 1924, when he was talking to priests and to psychologists. And so the back brown picture is the picture of the four bodies, and then all of this other information is talking about his understanding of metals, the planets, the digestive systems in the brain and the organisation of those systems, and then I've added to it the agriculture story about the physical formative forces, the cosmic and earthly activities that are going on there, and so what this does is that it actually allows us to place this top picture over the periodic table. And so it tells us about the energetic activity of all of the elements in this picture. So that's all come out of this simple question of let's just turn it onto the internal physical body arm and see what we see. And so this is what we see, which is, pretty far out. And I guess the next sort of part of this is we probably need to go back, and you may even cut this in at a certain point, and because I missed it. So we can do this whole process here of identifying the energetic activity of all of the elements. But there is one other question that we have to ask, is that how do we see all this in a three-dimensional spherical form? How do we find that? And so what we find is that we've got these three groups of elements that we've already found before, and we have three planes within the gyroscope. So which group of elements will fit on which plane? Simple question, isn't it? And if you've got three planes and you've got three groups of elements, hey, so the question comes that the major elements, the backbone of the whole game, we would consider to be on the vertical, one of the vertical axes, because we've got two vertical axes and one horizontal. So if we fix the first vertical axis on the major elements, we've got that. Now the next question comes, where are we going to put the trace elements? Now there's 10 of them, and the question is, what do the trace elements do? And so they are really pivotal in the sparking of biological processes. They're all active in these various, amino acid developments and processes that occur. And so they're intimately involved in the life processes. Now, where do we find life processes in a three-dimensional structure? So when we come to the solar system, where do we find life forms? Whereabouts do you think we'd find them? On the horizontal plane. That's correct. on the horizontal plane. And then when we go to the galaxy, where are we going to find those life forms? Where's the solar system? On the horizontal plane. So life occurs on the horizontal plane. So there's a high probability we could put those trace elements on the horizontal plane, which of course means the third set of elements, which are the spirit ring of elements. The elements only manifest on the spirit ring. You know, the spirit is vertical. It's a vertical activity. So we would naturally put that one on the second vertical. And so there we have three-dimensional chemistry. That was pretty simple, wasn't it? You know, we just followed a simple thought process, logical, truthful, and there it is. It's just sitting there. So that's that question, and then we can finish. We got to okay. Now there is one other question that's interested me through the years, and many things that I've okay. So one of the things that's really interested me through the years has been the similarity of my thoughts to Walter Russell, who's this early 20th century American genius. And he organised chemistry as a spiral rather than as a rectangle. And so he gives us this picture here. And so he tells us about the normal, here's your 7 rings that I have. He has them as sort of parts of this spiral. And because of course, you know. And so what he does though, is he suggests that beyond hydrogen, there is another 4 rings of subatomic particles. And so the question comes, well, that's all very interesting, but what can we do with them, and what are they, and all this? And of course, people have been studying these subatomic particles for quite a long time now. And there's a wonderful book by Fred Walters and Dr. blah, 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 who put forward a whole story about the connection of the subatomic particles that Russell talks about to the standard model of subatomic particles, to the generation of all these amino acids out of the DNA that is created from these subatomic particles. So it's a fantastic story. But of course it all comes down to the fact that, well, we can't really get these elements, so we can't really do anything about it. So we'll just manipulate the major elements up here, and that's the best we can do. So this all intrigued me quite a bit, and so I thought, how would I look at this? And of course, the subatomic elements are within this red spot here. So they're all within that red circle. And so, as an artistic exercise, of course, we can enlarge that circle to be this big. So this orange ring here is this orange ring on the outside here, right? And so these are then the rings of the 4 parts of his chart. And so we can say, well, what if these polarize, so that the most inside and the most outside polarize? And so basically we just have the orange in the middle, and then these just start polarizing down like that. And so what that means is we can start to gain a picture of the character of these elements based on a reference system that we already have established. And so we can start to look at them within the gyroscope and put our energetic model of bodies onto all of these elements very simply. That's pretty simple, isn't it? And then we can say, well, what happens when we put it on the internal arm of itself and look at those elements and associate it to this established picture that we already have? What does that tell us about all those elements? So that's been simple, isn't it? Well, we're just doing really simple things and following these patterns that we've already established, and it just gives us all this information. You know, I see this whole thing as an information generation device. You know, that's all we've been doing all along, haven't we? Just here's more information, more insight, more structure. And so that's basically the main questions that we have. And just out of interest, I've looked at how this structure can be found in things like the Wells Cathedral Chapter House and the Chartres Labyrinth, that we can start finding in all these stone structures around the planet and any circle, but them as a reference, you know. So there you go. That's the questions. So how many questions is that?